Welcome, everyone, to the Envision Rural Talks. My name's DeWayne Taylor. I'm a senior broadcasting major, and an angler entrepreneur focused on growing my business as a master of ceremonies and speaker. And this is Jordyn Bader, the graduate assistant at the Rural Futures Institute. And we are very pleased to be here to host your Envision Rural Talks.
Envision Rural Talks are designed to showcase big ideas in a TED-style presentation. You're about to hear from 11 speakers who submitted their big idea, and through a competitive process, were selected to showcase this idea here at the main stage at the Rural Futures Conference. These talks cover a variety of topics, but one theme remains consistent. These talks will provoke you to think about how you can impact the rural landscape and provoke your thoughts in choosing how we create a more hopeful rural future.
Now, each speaker will pitch their idea in less than 5 minutes, but we encourage you to continue the conversation by engaging with these speakers at tonight's poster and partnering session. In the meantime, showcase cool thoughts and ideas with your communities by using our official hashtag, I'll say it slowly, hashtag RFC2015. Once again, that is hashtag RFC2015. And now we are hashtag so excited to introduce hashtag. We're excited to introduce our first Envision Rural speaker, a thoughtful and reflective leader. Our first speaker is a catalyst and change maker among rural communities. With his talk entitled, Nature is Muse, Local Expertise and Community Abundance, please help us welcome Matt REZAC from the Sherwood Foundation.
Thanks. So here is the history of Earth as told in 1 year. Life appears on February 25th. It marinates for about 2 billion years, and then it becomes multicellular. Things start to pick up, though, with fungi, fish, reptiles, mammals, and flowers showing up in time for winter. Dinosaurs go extinct on December 25th, which is highly over-commercialized if you ask me. Our cousins show up just in time for lunch on New Year's Eve, but unfortunately, there's not much to eat because we don't invent agriculture until late that night. The first factories are built with 2 seconds left in the year, meaning the last 150 years have been a planetary blink. The point here is that we are novices in this history, but nature is an authority. And biomimicry is looking to nature as a model, mentor, and muse. So here are 4 biomimicry principles for the rural future. Principle 1, nature runs on sunlight, which is a free and ubiquitous source of energy. Because of photosynthesis, sunlight is transformed and supports all living things on Earth. So what's the free source of energy for rural communities? Well, it's not grant dollars, it's love of and commitment to home. All across our state, people are doing uncommon things. You have 2 public entities who have co-sponsored a grocery store so that students can learn to become entrepreneurs. You've got 3 guys who are proving that locally crafted beer is a viable agent of change in a town of 2,100. You have 70% of households in a community making a contribution to their local community foundation. And you have 2 immigrant businesswomen who start a nonprofit because they love their community as much as the Chamber of Commerce does. The actions of these people are like photosynthesis that transforms their love into remarkable forms of community life, and this is an asset that we have available to tap. Although nature has free energy, it wastes nothing. And I want to talk about waste in terms of human potential, which gets thrown out of car windows all the time. It happens in every meeting where the loudest guy, usually, takes up all the space. And it happens in the passive-aggressive power plays that keep vibrant people from accomplishing their dreams. It happens every time people are pushed to the margins in our society, and it happens whenever we just don't listen to one another. We have found an exorbitant number of ways to waste our most precious resource, which is the human spirit. And you might call me a Pollyanna, but I can actually stand witness before you today and say that it's not like that every place, and that the difference is when a group of people makes the decision that they are not going to tolerate such wasteful and destructive behavior. The location of that choice is always local, and it always requires local expertise. So what you have in front of you is where I grew up. And you can see the general outline, hopefully. But if my family members looked at this, they would see family work weekends, they'd see nieces painting benches, they'd see mom walking Charlie, they'd see some incredibly creative sisters and boys frying turkeys, and 3 generations of little bottoms sliding down the cellar door. Now, if you were to take this to my family and say, here's how you become a large family on a small acreage, we'd laugh you off the property. But that's kind of what it's like when us outsiders visit communities and don't have an appreciation and are tone deaf to local expertise. Local expertise knows who needs to be in the room. It knows who you can count on. It knows who's burned bridges and who's done the hard work of earning back trust. It knows who has incredible public leadership skills but struggles with deep personal brokenness. And that kind of fluency is only earned after living in a place over time. And it's the only kind of expertise that is required anytime you're trying to get something done in a small community. Finally, nature banks on diversity. So scientists think that life has nearly gone extinct 5 times, but its incredible variation is what has allowed it to survive. And this principle still can work for us today, and here's why. Innovation feeds on diversity because at its most basic element, it requires 2 distinct ideas to become linked. And so the more options you have, the more links you get, the more potential innovations you have to build a pathway towards the future. The trick is it requires not just the presence of difference, but also the ability to work effectively across differences. And I think we are sitting on an Ogallala aquifer of unlinked potential, especially across class, race, and ideology. We tend to spend our time in homogeneous circles, and it's very safe, and it's very limiting, and potentially it's very, very risky. And of course, the simple solution is to take the time that it takes to build a real relationship with someone who's different than us. So, how do you practice biomimicry? These are 2 trailheads. The first is embrace the fact that everything is interdependent. Treat yourself and others as though you believe that this is vitally true and just watch what happens. The second is embrace constant change, because life is not an equation to be figured out or to be controlled. It's more like doing improv for a bunch of curious monkeys. And our job is to love our place, to play our riffs, and to have a good time, because quicker than you know, it's somebody else's turn. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks for that reminder that when it comes to community development, we must rely on all the people in our community and embrace the change that happens as we evolve in our communities and as leaders. The Rural Futures Institute is dedicated to connecting academic researchers with rural communities to help solve real-world problems. Our next speaker, in his role at Peru State College, has done just that as a researcher. With his talk entitled, Know Thyself, How Academic Institutions Can Facilitate Change in the Local Environment, join me in welcoming Dr. Kyle Ryan.
Thank you very much. What a great conference, right? Where else in the world are you going to go and find out on social media the night before a conference the executive director is working on a manure spreader? And I shared with him at lunch yesterday that the irony was not lost on me with that. My name is Kyle Ryan. I'm from Peru State College in southeast Nebraska. Not too long ago, the citizens of southeast Nebraska got together on a grant-funded project to identify their strengths and weaknesses with living in that community. Like you would think, their strengths were agriculture, tourism, education, and the quality of life. Their weaknesses, like you would think, finding jobs, retaining their youth, and bringing in young families. Peru State College, we recognize this. We like to collaborate with the surrounding environment as much as possible. as well as collaborating with other educational institutions like the University of Nebraska Medical Center on programs like RHOP, KHOP, and FEAST. RHOP is the Rural Health Opportunities Program, KHOP is Kearney Health Opportunities Program, and FEAST is the Public Health Early Admission Student Track. These programs provide tuition remission for undergraduates with a guaranteed seat in the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Now let me repeat that. Tuition remission for undergraduates with a guaranteed seat in graduate school. Let's up the ante on crazy here. I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm okay with providing a free education to these kids. I'm okay with the fact that after 4 years, they can say, thanks for the free education, but I've changed my mind, I don't want to go to UNMC. I'm okay with the fact that they can say, thanks for the free education, thanks for the opportunity to study at UNMC, but I don't want to go back home. I don't show up at their doorstep and say, my friends Johnson and Brock want to find out why you're not moving back home. Okay? Not only am I okay with this, but let's up the ante on craziness a little bit more. I would like to see more of this, and my chancellor is here, so if you see someone running down the stairs to tackle me, it's okay. The reason why, these are the domains of personal wellness. And as you can see, we have intellectual, social, emotional, physical, it goes on and on and on. The RHOP, KHOP, and FEAST programs provide financial and occupational wellness. We provide jobs for individuals and financial wellness when they go back to rural Nebraska. But what is the draw to go back to rural Nebraska if all the other domains of wellness are not in place? So I would advocate for a Master's of Business Administration with undergraduate tuition remission, fine arts, social work, information technology. Let's bring in the whole kitchen sink here to provide kids with graduate education in hopes that they'll return to rural areas and give back to the community from whence they came. So here we are, the model for change, a public health model, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. We recognize the need for change. We're at the end of the preparation stage. We're on the precipice of the action stage. Chuck, let's be bold. Let's be innovative. Let's provide some hope for future generations of Nebraskans. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for Dr. Kyle Ryan. So, change in the local environment affects communities on a global scale. Future growth comes with just as many positive promises as it does unknowns. Now, as the world grows, as our communities grow, so do the environmental problems. Luckily for us, there are people out there trying to make solutions. Alan Koluk, with the Nebraska Watershed Network at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, is here to talk solutions and new tactics using engaged citizens, presenting taming super wicked environmental problems with an engaged community. Please welcome Alan Koluk.
Thanks. I'm an academic, which means that I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes. So I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to make it easy on you, and I'm going to cut to the chase. 4 words. Think globally, act locally. All right. So when I get the hook, just remember those words, because I won't finish. It's just a joke. I'll be in time. Super wicked problems. As the moderator just said, we are in an age when we're dealing with environmental problems that are global. And those problems have been given the moniker of being super wicked problems. What's a super wicked problem? It's national to global in scale. There's no single point at which the problem originates from. It's originating from thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different points simultaneously. The solutions are nuanced. They're not point of fact. It's not the kind of thing where 2 of us can sit outside at 5 o'clock and say, this is the solution. It doesn't work that way. Much more nuanced. And the solutions that we could come up with potentially today, if the problem is not remediated, won't work tomorrow. And of course, you see the polar bear here. The poster child for this is global climate change, clearly. However, I'll talk about a couple of other areas where it's important as well. Now, in the face of that, what do we have to combat that? And as Matt said earlier on, the engaged citizenry. The engaged citizenry within urban environments, but also within rural environments. The engaged citizenry is actually the answer. So to tame super wicked problems, we need civilian participation, extraordinary mobility, being able to amass people to do work simultaneously in many different places at the same time, unconventional tools, and again, mobilization of large numbers of individuals. Okay, now you're all thinking, yeah, that's nice, that's Pollyanna, thanks a lot, buddy, next talk. Is this actually happening? Yeah, it's happening now. It's happening today. And I will give you 2 examples. And now I can relax a little bit because I know I'm getting towards the end of my talk, so I have some extra time because my 2-minute time frame hasn't even come up yet. But I'll give you 2 examples of that. The first is Chile. Chile is a coast. Chile is about 3,000 miles north-south and about 100 miles long. It's all surface area. It's no volume, right? Chile also is all coastal. So the coastal environment is their bread and butter, just like corn, soybean rotation and cattle in Nebraska is our bread and butter. Their coast is their bread and butter. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there is what's known as the Pacific Gyre that's carrying microplastics. What's the fate and transport of those microplastics? Students up and down the entire coast of Chile are generating data on microplastics that's winding up in peer-reviewed scientific literature and winding up being involved in Chilean regulation of their own marine environment. And it's being done by high school students in urban areas and also high school students in rural areas. Let me give you another example. This is the Mississippi River watershed. The Mississippi River watershed drains the Midwest. The Midwest is where a lot of agrochemicals are coming from. Those agrochemicals don't just affect us and our health, they affect the health of this entire watershed. So wouldn't it be great if we could look at the watershed all at one time and then look at the occurrence of these agrochemicals over time? We did that in 2014. And we actually looked at the occurrence of atrazine manning or arming citizen scientists with the proper tools. We allowed those individuals to go out and make measurements up and down the entire Mississippi River basin, from Lake Itasca, Minnesota, all the way down to New Orleans. The final point here is I was supposed to answer a question at the very end, and the question that you may all be having is, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. How could I do that in my hometown community? The answer to that is, come and talk to me. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kulak, and for reminding us that we have an opportunity to interact with all of these Envision Rural speakers tonight at the poster and partnering session, so be sure to connect with each of these individuals. Whether it's environmental issues or business development, we've discussed this week that innovation and technology are very important for rural communities to thrive. Our next speaker is an innovator and creator who is reshaping an industry that is so vital to our rural economy. With his talk entitled Changing an Industry, please help me welcome Vishal Singh with Quantified Ag.
Thank you. My company is Quantified Ag, and we are located in the next building over. We are a precision livestock data analytics company. And I'm just telling you a little bit about what we do. So Nathan here works in a feedlot of over 10,000 head of cattle. And every single year, they lose $1 million to sick animals. And that's a relatively small feedlot. They go all the way up to over 600,000 head of cattle. Just imagine how much money they lose every single year. It's a big deal. So feedlot workers like Nathan, they walk their pens every day looking for sick animals. And this reliance on visual observation leads to a lot of animals being missed. Well, what if Nathan could see his animals this way, through data, then he would know exactly which animal is sick and could put his focus there. And that's essentially the problem we're solving. Our customer base has a problem identifying outliers, and we just show them who those outliers are so they can know where to pay attention to. And we've done this by creating a fully integrated platform of wearables for animals plus data analytics. So here's our system. It's an electronic ear tag that collects biometric data on individual animals as well as behavioral data. And that data is transmitted wirelessly to our servers in the cloud. We triangulate all that data and we provide meaningful information back to the smartphones and computers of feedlot workers. Now, we are patent pending on our ear tags, we're patent pending on our crimping tools, patent pending also on our communications protocol. So essentially what we have is it's a subscription service, and the subscription includes all the software and hardware for our customer base. They rotate their inventories typically 2 to 2.5 times per year, and our subscription is right there with them during that inventory rotation. And to talk a little bit about the overall problem, out of the 22.5 million feedlot cattle, or cattle on feed in the United States rather, 4.5 million of them show symptoms of illness. That's a lot of cattle getting sick. And out of all those 22.5 million cattle, about 2% are lost to death loss, which leads to a $3.2 billion loss just in the cattle feedlot industry. That doesn't include dairy cattle, it doesn't include range cattle, hog operations, none of that, just cattle feedlots in the US. So our competitors, some of them are doing some interesting things. They've developed technologies that kind of end up creating more problems for our end user base. But we've looked at all these competitors, and it's difficult to scale their technology to this level, and a feedlot like this. And what we did was we built our system with scalability in mind to cover even large operations like this with ease and simplicity. So everything is wireless, and the animals are tracked no matter where they are in the feedlot. Our management team has a lot of experience in ag tech, animal science, software development. Basically, we're a bunch of nerds. We also have an amazing set of advisors that have combined experience in animal science, manufacturing, and business. So we've done a lot of field tests, we've developed the technology, and what we've found is we can already tell the difference between sick animals and healthy animals with our data. But what we've also been doing is we've been collecting a large data set or a large library of data sets of different types of animals. So animals that are high performance cattle, animals that are average cattle, or animals that have foot rot or respiratory problems, so on and so forth. And we're getting to the point where we'll be able to identify and diagnose illness just with our data. So for a subscription fee of $2.50 per head, we offer this service to feedlots so they can know which animals are sick within hours rather than days. And we're bringing innovative technology to feedlots, and if you want to learn more about it, feel free to stop by later. I think there's a spot where I'll be standing there hoping to talk to somebody, so please come talk to me. Thanks.
Another hand for Vishal. So industries such as the beef industry are largely run through rural communities. And sometimes you might wonder how these rural communities come to be. Well, Jessica Shoemaker is from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln College of Law and will be presenting on the public parts of private property, community engagement, and rural design. Help me in welcoming Jessica Shoemaker.
Those were also good. I want to start by talking about property, and private property, to be specific, which is not something that I think we do very comfortably or very often because, well, it's private. So unless we have some sort of controversy where property rights are specifically at issue, often having a really engaged dialogue is not something that we do comfortably. And so instead, we often start thinking about private property with this conception of an absolute, what I tell my students, of the kingdom of one or the queendom of one, if you're so inclined, in the sense that we have absolute control and liberty within our private space, which is certainly an important part of our conception of private property. But the problem, of course, is that none of us, especially in the Great Plains, actually live on an island. And so our property uses impact other people's property rights. My right to grow a garden of invasive weeds certainly impacts my downwind neighbors' rights to be free from those weeds. So there's this relational sense of how property rights and property uses actually interact with each other. But this is not purely restrictive. There's also a lot of benefits that come from this. So if we think about in real estate, we often say it's the location of property that matters so much, and location matters because of the positive uses of our land uses of our neighbors. And this is as true in a downtown Main Street as it is across an ecosystem or a larger region of how we all aggregate our individual uses of discrete pieces of property and how that has this collective effect in the design of our rural communities, of our rural landscapes, and much broader beyond this. Now, when we think about, we have all this private property, all these individual decision makers, how do we aggregate that so that we actually achieve the highest and best uses of these landscapes and these places? We basically have two strategies that we typically use to encourage coordination and to sort of influence how landowners will make these decisions. So our one strategy is government. We can have government regulation, whether it's taxation or zoning or other incentive structures. Now, the problem, of course, is that government can be sort of a blunt instrument, especially in rural places. Sometimes it feels like policy is relatively uncoordinated, can be inefficient and expensive. And so instead, we often turn to market. Let's let the market dictate how people will choose to use their individual property, and we'll let pricing through the market achieve the highest and best use of these landscapes and these community spaces. But markets also can be inefficient and have inherent structural inequities. Plus, some things are just hard to price, whether it be ecosystem services or the value of a community school in your neighborhood or the health and welfare of the planet, right? These are hard things to value. Now, here's the other premise where I start this talk and this thinking about how we aggregate and coordinate our land uses in the best way. It's that as landowners, individual landowners, we all actually want to do what's best, right? We care about things that aren't just our individual bottom line. These are my two sweet daughters, and for their sake and for others, I certainly care about things more than just my bottom line, and I think most people do. So here's the big idea. Here's the big suggestion. What if instead of just these two imperfect strategies to encourage cooperation and collaboration and innovation in how we use our individual property rights, what if we actually encouraged conversation and dialogue and collaboration about the public parts of private property? And every academic theory of property that predicts that property uses will misallocate resources in certain circumstances assumes that we're not adequately able to communicate with each other about those land uses. And if we facilitated that communication, just think of what the potential might be. And so that's what we did. We developed a game. It's this hypothetical land use space called the State of Plains, in association with the Rural Futures Institute, used a bunch of research and a bunch of interdisciplinary experts, scholars, and students on participation strategies and land use planning, and also just what the big challenges are, what the big stresses and issues are when it comes to land use issues. And we built a game. And the game was hugely popular. So people who participated in the game found this tremendous value in being able to have a really civil dialogue and an engaged dialogue about how private property could be used to its best potential, how we could coordinate that, and what our collective visions for our spaces are. And the the feedback was so positive that we actually got a grant, which was led by folks out of the United Kingdom who started this sort of game idea in the first place, and we collaborated with initially, and then colleagues in Australia and Sweden who all have different versions of this game, and then of course us through the Rural Futures Institute with the Great Plains, and created a new thing that I get to announce to you for the very first time, which is still in draft stage, but there's an online portal where everyone can go. The website's up here, roughkit.org. You can pull a game board, you can pull the tools to make your own game board. There's a bank of questions, there's case studies, there's guidance, and the idea is that we can all use this tool to create a research-based platform for conversations about property. Now, I don't want to suggest that these conversations are going to solve all of our land use challenges, all of our wicked problems, but they're certainly an important first step. There are issues of scale, where those decisions should be made, how to get the right people to the table, how to implement all of that. But if you think about the context of things like new energy development or ecotourism routes, or even the dynamic change that's happening on places like the urban-rural intersections and fringe spaces, there's a lot of potential here. And one thing I would just end with is that one thing that I think is particularly exciting about this project is actually what I think the Rural Futures Institute is about, which is the connection of research-based knowledge and community knowledge and integrating that into a holistic way of thinking about our landscapes. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Shoemaker, and for showing us how interactive tools such as Plainsopoly can help have those very difficult conversations around very important topics with community planning issues.